Her name is Dr. Anne Maria DeMars. She is not only an extraordinary woman and friend, a leader in her field, but also an expert in technology and a gold medalist. You can learn about her from Wikipedia, or you could be thrown by her. I don't recommend it because she's a judo expert. You can read about her, buy her books on Amazon, and you can even find out about her incredibly talented daughter. Her daughters are her pride and joy. And Anne Maria is also the one of the co-owners, the founder of Seven Generation Games, gamification around technology to build a better future. And she is the external evaluator on all of my current NSF funded grants, 100% of them. She's talented, she's inspirational, and she's a slave driver. Yes, that's what you get when you get her on your grant. You know, these are the milestones, Sandy, and this is when you said you would have this done. So it is my great joy to introduce you to Anne Maria DeMars, and I'm very fortunate to work with her, and we are very lucky that she is willing to do this talk for us. This is great. Thank you, Anne Maria.
Well, you're very welcome. After that introduction, I better do a good job, huh? So let me dive right into it. I'm going to do this out of order on purpose. Can you see this? Does it say writing proposals that get funded?
It
Yes,
does.
ma'am.
Perfect. So I'm going to do a little bit out of order because, well, first I'll tell you a little bit about me. In addition to having gold medal, I am president, founder of the Julie Group, which does statistical consulting evaluation. We used to do grant writing, but we don't anymore because I am full up to here with work. And also, as Sandy said, Seven Generation Games. I have a PhD in applied statistics, test and measurement from the University of California, an MBA from the University of Minnesota, a BSBA from Washington University, and I have been funded by a bunch of things, USDA, NIH, and so on. I used to keep track of how many grants I had written, you know, over 10 million funded, over 15 million funded. And then I started feeling like that McDonald's ad, you know, over 1 billion served, so I quit counting. But it's somewhere over 30 million. And I also have been a reviewer for the National Institute of Health and Department of Ed, for other health and human services funding in addition to NIH. And so today I want to talk about writing proposals that get funded. I'm doing a little bit out of order. I'm not going to start so much with the needs assessment, and I'll explain why. But first of all, when you open up an application, it's going to tell you how many points you get. So can you see all this? Are you seeing my notes or are you seeing the actual slide?
The actual slide.
Yeah, I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, so an application will tell you how many points you get. Usually it's something like this. The problem identification and need comes first, then goals and objectives, project design, and so on. And often, like in this example, which came from a real RFP, the project design and budget are going to be half of the proposal. So that's where you ought to be focusing your time is on that project design, and then the budget and key personnel. So all of that I want to focus on first, because those are areas where I see people lose a lot of points. And then if we have time, I will also give you a template on how I do this. And then if we have time, we'll go back and go over a little bit about the goals and objectives. So there's 3 documents that I almost always use when creating a grant, even if they don't go into the finished product. And that's a logic model, a template for scheduling, and a picture. And by the way, when I say picture, I am terrible at art. Let me see if I do have it. Wait, I will show you this later when we get to the pictures. It was on my wall, but I'm really terrible at art. And let's, in a minute, start with where people lose the most points. But if you're not familiar with logic models, I presume you are, but it's a 1-page document that includes needs, inputs, activities, and outcomes. We may go back to that later if we have time, but I start with the logic model. Just one page, this is what I'm going to do. This is why this is needed. Here's some things I'm going to do. Here's what I think is going to happen. And you need a literature review. You need assessments. You need objectives. You need assessment. You need objectives. But those are table stakes. Those are the absolute bare minimum to start. You need a lit review that backs up the need for your project with data and empirical peer-reviewed articles that show a need beyond your specific university or program. And I'm assuming somebody else is going to cover that. But also, in my experience, this is usually the strongest part of proposals. I'm not saying neglect this part. I'm just saying I see fewer people lose points on the needs section. You know there's a need. That's why you're writing a grant. And you probably all heard of SMART goals, so I'm not going to belabor that too much. SMART goals need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. And again, I assume you'll have a session on that at some point, and really do focus on all those aspects. So the reason I'm not hitting on it too much isn't because it's not important, but because I figure most people are familiar with that idea. Just one thing, do not irritate the reviewer. As a reviewer, one thing that irritates me is off the bat, what we call apple pie motherhood goals. Things that sound good, but are so generic, no one can be against them. But they don't tell me anything either. We're going to improve children's health or reduce the disparity in educational achievement at the elementary school level. I mean, nobody's against improving children's health, but that doesn't really help. So it needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable. It also needs to be achievable. You're probably not going to bring about world peace in 2 years for $500,000. Create a Gantt chart. That's the first thing we're going to do. It does not need to be very elaborate, but it lets you see your schedule at a glance, and dependencies. What are you going to do? So I have an example we're going to go through from a grant that we got funded. And now here, for example, the first thing I'm going to do is obtain IRB, Institutional Review Board approval, because I cannot do any data collection until that's approved. It doesn't start sense to start making the game until I have the game design approved by the tribe or school or whoever I'm working with. So this is my first draft of the Gantt chart, and I'm putting in everything I need to do. And over here, which we will talk about at length, are the objectives each of these activities relate to. Because if they don't relate to an objective, if they don't relate to an objective, why are you doing them? Why is the grant funding it? So what I want as a reviewer is if you can tell me a story. And I want to know, what are you going to do? How does that relate to your objectives? Who's going to do it? And how much are they going to cost you? Everything in your proposal should fit together. And what scores a proposal really highly is if I'm asking myself a question like, well, how does this relate to their objective? Or who's going to do that? And then the next section of the proposal, like key personnel, it says, and PI Justice is going to go to different institutions and perform outreach for the program to recruit students and mentors. So who's going to do it? How much are they going to cost you? And I'm going to give you a present. I am, because $1 million seems like a lot of money until it's not. And this is why I am giving you this present. You start out with it's 500,000 or 200,000 or whatever, and it seems like it's a lot of money. But really, if you have a 5-year grant, say, and you've got 2 people in there and they're making each 80,000 a year plus fringe benefits. So that's probably 240,000 a year right there. And 5 times 240,000 is more than $1 million. So all of a sudden you have to cut that budget. So I'm going to go through what I do and why I do it. And we're going to use a phase 2 Small Business Innovation Research Award as an example, which was funded. And the first example we're going to do is we were proposing to make interactive educational media to teach decision-making to youth in families impacted by methamphetamine addiction. So here's what happened. I can't see anything but this show, so it's bugging me. So I'm gonna stop it for a minute so I can see you all. So here's what happens. You have children, youth whose parents, older siblings are recommended for court ordered for counseling for addiction. And oops, I lost my meeting here. Here we go. They're court ordered counseling for addiction. And the parents are, the family members are. So this kid is sitting out here in the waiting room. And they wanted us, these clinics, to create something to teach functional decision making to these kids. So that's what we're going to do. So first, I wrote our objectives, and this is just the beginning of it. These are shortened, so the objectives in the actual grant are a little more specific and measurable and all those things. So I'm going to do these things: complete 12 commercial quality levels in a virtual world, expand interactive journals, model and motivational interviewing, develop in-game assessment, conduct usability testing. So those are my objectives. Now, we're going to see what I'm going to do with them next. And this should be in this template that if you did not get it or look at it, and at the beginning of it, it gives you, this will save you so much time. First of all, it will give you a better grant because everything in your grant will go together. It will save you a lot of time. So what we're going to do, the very first thing, remember I just showed you those objectives? So the first thing I do is I copy those objectives. I copied those objectives right here. So I had all of these objectives I was going to have. And now for every one of those objectives, I have activities. What am I going to do? So remember back there, I had all those objectives. So now I have a bunch of tasks. So this is where my Gantt chart and objectives go together. Start with your objectives, and under each objectives, write what specifically are you going to do? And I have seen a lot of people doing grants where they're not writing their proposal, they're pretending to write their proposal. And what I say by that, what I mean by that is they say, well, we'll make a game design, we'll make something to teach decision making to kids. Well, what exactly are you going to do and when are you going to do it? So down to the specifics. Oh, and I have read some grants lately that were written by AI, and it shows. And it shows because they are very generic. They're not going to have your specifics. And if they do have specifics, they're probably going to be wrong. So first of all, for every objective, I have written all the activities I'm going to do for that objective and what quarter they're going to be in. So this is a 2-year grant. Now I'm going to have this column here is going to be used in every other sheet. So make sure that everything you do is going to be in there, because if it isn't, nobody's going to be assigned to it and there's going to be no money for it. So now every single thing, let's see if I can make this bigger, that was in that first sheet, all of my tasks is in the sketch, is in here for hours. So here's where I'm going to put in all my people. Here's another thing I see in grants. We have David Croxford in the grant at 1.0 FTE, and he's in the budget. And I look in the grant and nothing in the grant says what David Croxford's going to do. Or I look in the grant and it says he's going to do the IRB, but he's in there for 1.0 FTE. Well, I'm not an idiot. I have a lot of bad things, but stupid is not it. And I know it does not take a full year, full time to do an IRB. So everyone, if you look up here, hopefully you can see this. This shows everything here is copied from that very first page. So not copied, but linked. So if I change, you'll see why this is really useful. All right. So for every single thing, I've got somebody who's going to do it. Now, they may not be named, like this person, so these are some of our developers. This person is just audio. This is our research assistant. But if I've got a research assistant line item in that budget somewhere, I'm able to tell you exactly what that person's going to do. And this may not end up in your grant at all, this particular document. But when I go to write the budget justification, it's going to be gold. So for every single person, for every single activity, I've got who's going to do it. And then at the bottom, I've got the total of those hours. And then I've got the cost of those hours. So the hourly rate times those hours. So I've got that for year one. I've got the exact same thing for year two. And again, these are just linked to my original tasks. And it's okay if in year two, nobody's doing the IRB because it was already done, that's fine. They don't have to show up everything in every year, but you do want to have all these tasks there because later on you might need to move stuff from year one to year two, or you might need to delete something altogether. So, and also your hourly rate might change from year one to year two. Same thing. I have the sum of all of these hours, and I have multiplied by the hourly rate. And then over here, I have the total of all those hours. And notice both of these things here highlighted in yellow. These are checks for accuracy. Because another thing that will lose you points, you always have that one person on a committee, like the college I used to work for, it was their chief financial officer, which she was on a grant. She didn't pay attention to a lot of other stuff, but she would go to the budget and she would make sure all those numbers were correct. So here I have the sum of the hours for every person. And those hours were calculated by multiplying the total number of hours for everybody by their hourly rate. When I go to the budget for year one, those two numbers better match up. And they do, so that's wonderful because they're calculated in two different ways. So this will do a validity check on your budget for you. It will also do a check on the number of hours that everybody's working, because I see this over and over and over. Somebody pulls a number out of the air. Oh, Sandy's going to work on this grant per 25 FTE. Well, where did you get that? What is she going to do? So this person loading chart may end up in your grant. If you run out of space, which I almost always do, I feel like if I'm not at the bare edge of the maximum page limit they give, I have left something out. If they say 15 pages, I'm going to write right down to those 15 pages because I'm going to take every inch of space I can. So you may end up probably including, if you include a person loading chart, it's going to be for the total. And again, how do I get my total? Again, these tasks are linked in from that very first sheet. So they're going to be everywhere the same. And this is going to be the sum of year one and year two. So once I have done the first year and the second year, I have so once I've done the first year, I've got my first year budget, as you'll see. And once I've done the second year, I've got my second year budget. I can add them together and get the total budget. And my year one budget is going to have all of these people. If they're in the budget, by God, there ought to be somewhere they're doing something. And that something they're doing better be aligned to the objectives. And this might seem like common sense, But the reason I'm bringing these up is these are things that lose people points over and over. You've got somebody in the grant, and I can't for the life of me figure out why that person's in your grant. And I just saw this the other day. So I have my year one budget. This is, and usually salaries are going to be by far the largest part of it, right? And then there's going to be your fringe benefits, which may or may not change from year to year. All that is you multiply, as you can see up here, I hope, you multiply a percentage, whatever your percentage is for your institution, by the salary. Your salary and fringe is the sum of that. And then travel's the other one that varies. And at the bottom here, I have all of my trips, the per diem, the number of days, and then over here, the total cost of the trip. So the cost is going to be the per diem times the number of days, plus if I need a car, and flight mileage. So, and then that number is going to be copied up there. And you might think, well, why would you do this? Because you already have those forms, right? And the forms that you have, the federal forms, they add up all these numbers, but they have a total for salaries. They have a total for travel. And when it comes down to, which it almost always does, you don't have enough money in the budget. You went through all of these things. Sandy's one of these people that I told her before. She's heard me say this a bunch of times. When I first went to my dissertation chair and told him my idea, what I wanted to do my dissertation on, and he looked at me and he said, Anna Maria, that's a great idea if you're going to write 8 dissertations. But since you're not, how about you go back and revise it? And many grants, people start, oh, this is for $1 million. This is for $3 million. We're going to cure world hunger and bring about world peace. And then it turns out that no, you're not. So we have our travel. We've got our year 2 budget, which is the exact same thing. This time I have one last trip because that particular grant you're required to go to DC for it. So there's my travel again. And here's my salaries, which were found the same way. And sure enough, the sum of those matches up with the sum here where I took the hours times the hourly rate for everybody, because their hourly rate might change from year to year. And if you forgot to put in that cost of living, then it's coming out of somewhere. And if you have to tell everybody on your project they're not getting raises when the rest of the university did because you didn't put in the cost of living, you're not going to have a happy time. So that you've got the year 1 budget, the year 2 budget, and then the total budget. You're all seeing this Excel sheet, right? Okay, because sometimes I go and I talk and talk, that like 5 minutes in, somebody says, we're not seeing anything, but your glasses look nice. So here is the total budget. There's the check for the total budget. And so that's the year 1 budget plus the year 2 budget should be equal to, when you sum all of these up. So now we've done several things. We have made sure that every activity that we're doing aligns to a budget, because as you know, if it aligns to an objective, because it doesn't align to an objective, then maybe it's not a direct cost. Maybe that's part of your indirect cost. If it doesn't align to a budget, it's not an allocable cost. If it doesn't align to an objective in your grant, it's not an allocable cost. If they're doing the payroll, that's not an allocable cost. So everything there is from the very beginning aligned with an objective. So I wrote my objectives first, and then in the actual grant, these will be written up as activities. But I do this first. I do this before I write the grant. So I know everything I'm going to do. I know everybody who's going to do it. And then here's why I do this. Let's say I get here and it's $704,000. And this grant only allows, the maximum they're going to allow is $700,000. Well, I need to take that out of somewhere. So I can go through here and say, could I just take one of these activities out? Could I do fewer of these? I make more money than Luis, so maybe I could do 40 hours and he could do 44. And then he can go back and see, oh, well, that only cut it down 1,000. Okay. Maybe in year 2, let's see, maybe I could do 40 and he could do 70. So it makes it really easy to go into, okay, I'm still over by 2,000. Maybe I'm over by a lot. Is there something here that I really don't need to do? So at this point, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. And if you do take these out, whose line item is it coming out of? So I'm going to say, I don't know, let's say I decide to take out this 1.3. So I delete that. Now, everywhere I go, I'm going to see this missing. So I'm going to delete it here. And the other reason this is great is because if you delete something, it doesn't show up later in your proposal. So now I'm going to go through here, delete that individuation. And now my total budget's down to 671,000. So the reason for putting it all together like this is, that's weird. Can you see me? It says stop sharing. I look like I'm all behind the screen, like in Stranger Things. No?
I
We
see
can
you.
See you
we
fine.
can see you.
Okay. So the reason for doing this is, first of all, to make sure every task aligns to an objective, so it's allocable. Secondly, to make sure that every task has a person assigned to it. Thirdly, to make sure that the FTE that you are giving in your budget aligns with the amount of work that somebody's actually doing. And then the fourth thing is to make sure that when you have to take things out of grant, and I see this all the time, where there's a task mentioned in one spot and then it never shows up again. Or you say that somebody's going to do something, but they're not in the budget. And how that often happens is you got down to, and often you get down to it at the end, right? The grant's due in 2 days and you've been working on it and you realize, oh no, we're 200,000 over. So this is why I do this at the very, very beginning. And then I get people to sign off on it, and then I write the grant. So I will stop for questions if anybody has any questions, because my children, who are lovely, give me advice. And one of their pieces of advice to me when I go to conferences is, Mom, don't just go on and on and on and on like you do. Stop and let other people talk every now and then.
Well, we do have a couple of questions, Anne Maria. Michaela would like to know if we're writing a proposal for a K-01 grant and the intention is to use that as preliminary work for an R-01 application, is it appropriate to include budgeted time in the third, fourth year finances for writing the future R-01?
Usually you are not allowed to put grant writing. You're not allowed, I know for grant writing, you're not allowed to put grant writing services into your grant. I never heard of that being allowed. What you could do, and even if it was allowed, if I was reviewing it and part of what you were asking for was grant writing time, I wouldn't be too impressed. What I would be impressed is if you said, we're going to use these preliminary bases as a future study. Here's how I'm doing this pilot study. This is how this is going to inform the next year. But the short answer to that, and I'll get to that later actually, and I say this all the time, you need to know that RFP better than God knows the Bible. I would go through and read every single thing they say in that specific RFP, and 90% of them, we are in a, as the Chinese say, interesting time. But generally speaking, 90% of them are the same from year to year. And see what your particular RFP allows. generally grant writing is not allowed. Often for a lot of grants, doing a literature review is not allowed. So I'd see specifically what they allow. But even if they allow it as a reviewer, I would be a lot more interested in somebody saying, I am using this time to collect data, do some analyses, and then develop hypotheses as to how these results would inform my future R1 research, developing my lab. Now, if all of that stuff goes into your grant proposal, that's great. Did you have another question?
I have a whole list of questions.
Ask away.
All right. When a proposal is technically compliant but still does not feel fundable, what is usually missing beneath the surface?
Oh, that's a really good question. I have seen a lot of those proposals. One that's a very common thing is you talk a lot about why this thing is needed, but not about why you are the people to do it. Because there will be a lot of proposals that come in. So I'm reviewing things for a grant that's supposed to reduce substance abuse, right? Every single grant has information on needs in their community, the rate of alcoholism or methamphetamine addiction or whatever it is. So your grant has that too. And you say that you are going to reduce substance abuse in your community, but you don't specify why what you're going to do is different than what's already being done, why you are the people to do it. So I think that it goes back to that apple pie and motherhood. You say substance abuse is bad. We're going to reduce substance abuse in our community. We're going to do a bunch of activities, but you don't really tell me what specifically you're doing, why you're the people to do it. So I think that's a big one. The other one is that you submit a grant and say, this is a big issue in your community, but especially for federal grants, they're looking at things that can be generalized. So if it's a demonstration grant, we want you to demonstrate how this can be applied in other places. So I think those are the two big ones, not explaining how this is a national problem and your solution can be applied nationally, and not explaining what specifically you're going to do and why you are the ideal team to do it. What's your other question?
How do you personally decide whether a proposal problem is really a writing problem, a design problem, a budget problem, or a funder fit problem?
Well, one of the things with budget problem is easy enough is I look at it, and like most reviewers, I'm invited in on things that I have a good deal of expertise on. So I have been an evaluator for substance abuse prevention programs for many, many years. I've been an evaluator on educational programs for many, many years. I have written a lot of software, educational software. So if you say that you're going to create something that's akin to World of Warcraft, but includes math and science problems in it, and you're going to do it for $500,000, including recruiting subjects, paying the developers, collecting data, analyzing the data, publishing it, you're not. Because I know what it takes, you're not. So I think if it's a budget problem, if you, whether you're the reviewer or the person writing, you know, if you don't know what it costs to do that thing, then you need somebody on your team that does. So I think that it's easy enough to show it's a budget problem. Does the thing you want to do cost $500,000 and the maximum for this grant is $100,000? What were the other things if it's a fit problem? Oh, that's a really good question. I strongly encourage you to call up. I have some other slides if we have time to talk about this. Call up whoever is listed as the point person in that RFP if you have a question about it, and say, I am thinking, now some of them will say in the RFP, again, some will say you can't contact them after a certain date. Some will say you can't contact them until the RFP is open. But whenever you can call that person, do, and ask them. And I've gotten some very large grants where I called somebody and they said, this is not the sort of thing we fund. Do not ever argue with that person. I've also sat in meetings with other people where they're like, oh, but I know you only fund rural development, but our urban youth need this too. Well, they do, but that is a grant for rural youth development. So, but what has happened, I called up somebody and I said, we're thinking about doing this game to include math in a game that also teaches Native American history. And we're going to include traditional values of perseverance and that, and talk about how one of the fundamental principles of mathematics is perseverance, and where to collect data. We're going to have an intervention control group and all this. And the person I talked to said, that's not the sort of thing we fund. They were much more into like bleeding edge spaceships on Mars kind of research. And then they said, but have you considered the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a rural youth development fund, and you might be a perfect fit for that, which was something I didn't even know existed. For a lot of our educational software, we have gotten funding from the Department of Agriculture. And when I tell anybody like agriculture, but there's a lot of kids in rural areas, and some of them are children of farm workers who don't speak English. Some of them are Native American children who are very interested in their culture. So even if that person says that's not the sort of thing we fund, don't argue with them. Say, well, that's really helpful to know. Is there anyone you know or any other fund that you think that I should apply to? And sometimes they'll say, no, sorry, I can't help you. But even if they just say, no, that's not the sort of thing we fund, don't waste your time. And this is true even more so with nonprofits, with philanthropy. They know what they're going to fund. And if they tell you that we're not really interested in funding programs for English language learners, we're more focused on funding research for children in rural communities that are in very remote areas that don't have internet access, whatever it is, that's what they're going to fund. So I think just ask and find out, and also just read the RFP. Was there
Did
something
you want
else?
to run through the other slides, or do you want to continue with Q&A?
Whichever. I have some more, so I can go through some more, and then we can go through some more Q&A. How's that?
Sounds
I
good.
definitely have more questions, Anne Maria. So yeah, let's just go back to the slides, and then when we get ready, we'll go through a couple more.
Okay, and then I'm going to give you all multiple assignments. So
Yay.
let's see. So you can see this, right? Where it says
Yes, ma'am.
where it says objectives. Now, the next thing you want to do is draw a picture. And seriously, draw the parts you envision in order. And I say this for a couple of reasons. One is academics like to write a lot. And sometimes the things they write aren't all that clear. Also, when you're writing and you did the lit review and the objectives, sometimes it can get a little bit exhausting and you need to look at it a different way. And I am terrible at art, by the way. You do not need to be good at art. It's wonderful that there are so many programs out there. Also, people say you cannot fail art, but I will show you shortly that you can. So here's my picture of an educational game. I'm thinking, what are we going to do here? I have my objectives, and I just sat down and drew it out in PowerPoint. We're going to have a game. It's going to have a login. We're going to have some 2D games. Oops. We're going to have a virtual store. What do we need? So it doesn't, there is no rule for this. This is just how I'm starting to get, remember I had all those activities? This is just how I'm starting to do it. Data input, this is what's going to need to be in my database. Oh, then I need a database. We need educational resources. Some of them need to be videos, web pages. And then as I start to get this down, then I realize somebody's got to do those things, right? There's got to be a scoring system, and we're going to automate the scoring. So here's one example. Here's another example. Here's another grant I wrote, something completely different. It was funded for a vocational rehabilitation project. What both of these pictures have in common is they show what you're going to do. So in this case, they're going to determine eligibility. That's the first thing they do. And they need eligibility for orthopedic handicaps, learning disabilities, substance abuse, and other. They're going to provide services. They're going to do an individualized plan of employment, and that might include adult literacy. It might include transportation to get them to job interviews or whatever, a vocational training, youth transition. This is going to assume, which I figure is a safe assumption if you're writing a grant, that you know a fair bit about the field, the project you propose to do. Here's the other thing they're going to do is job placement, which means they have to have some connection with tribal industries or education or human services. This was a grant that was on a reservation, but they're going to need to connect with folks off the reservation. So that's, even if you don't use it in the end, this one actually did end up going into the grant, but it's a start to look at what is it that you're going to do when you get to those activities. We looked at Excel already. Now, you might wonder, why are you going to create documents you might not use? So here's my assignments for you. We may just end early so you could do them, or do them in the middle, whatever you all want to do. But one is to draw that picture. Just draw it up. Oh, that's why I have to show you. I told you, you cannot fail art. Can y'all see this?
Yes.
This is the first drawing. It hangs in my office a few $1 million later. This is the first drawing of what the games to teach math based on Indigenous and Latino culture was. Over here, there's a lake that became the game Fish Lake. A lot of people ask me, are those dogs? No, those are deer down there. Anyway, this was my first drawing of it. And yes, you can in fact fail art if you are really, really bad at it. I always tell people I flunked art and aced calculus in high school, and it's been my path ever since. So it doesn't have to be beautiful, but just lay out what you're going to do. I tell my students sometimes in statistics, I want you to write this so the dumbest person I know can understand it. And please be aware that I know someone who is surprised that we see the same moon that they see in Kentucky. So. So back to why create documents you may not use. One is for planning purposes. As you write out all those tasks, you identify that you need personnel. And this is another thing that I see that kills grants. Especially now, you say you're going to write some new large language model. You're going to do something that leverages artificial intelligence. You have nobody listed there who has any expertise in that area at all. I wrote a grant with somebody and they wanted to do it. And I said, there's no way. It had specifically to do with treating people with mental illness on a reservation. And I said, there's no way I'm going to do this unless you find somebody for me to be a co-PI who has a PhD in clinical psychology or is a psychiatrist who is practicing on a reservation as expertise. And sure enough, they did. We didn't get the grant funded though, so not everything gets funded. But yeah, that year was not a good time to get things funded on minority health disparities, if you know what I mean. Anyway, you want to determine if your project is feasible given the time available. Sometimes you lay out that Gantt chart, and this goes back to, David's question about the fit. And you say, I can't do it in that time. And I've told people that there's no way you are going to be able to create, to go and gear up, get your equipment, recruit subjects, collect data, analyze the data, and have it all done within this period of time. You're just not going to be able to do it. So you can decide if this is even feasible. You can help schedule your activities and realize I need to do this IRB first. I need to connect with people, and that's coming up in a minute. And just get used to the fact that as you cut to fit the page limit, you're going to throw out a lot. I was working with somebody once that we were all working late at night at the university on this grant, and somebody said, we got to cut this. We got to cut a half page out. We got to cut this paragraph. And one of the guys says, but I worked so hard on that. Well, that is what it is. So to recap here, you have identified the problem, you stated the goals and objectives, which you did before. You drew a picture of your vision, and you identified some activities and personnel. Now, the very next thing you need to do is now you have your budget, right? You need a budget and a one-page abstract, and you need it now. You need to write a 2-page abstract that you can share with other people and organizations. So here's Myra. I just made that name up. But you're going to meet lots of people you probably need to get on board before you submit this proposal. You're going to have a lot of Myras. If you're doing it on a reservation or with a tribe, you need to get a tribal council resolution, maybe get tribal IRB approval. If you're working with a school, some Department of Ed programs want you to have a school or a district that agrees they're going to let you do research there. That means you need somebody to sign off on it. And that person is going to want to know, what are you doing? What's in your budget? What's in it for them? So whether it's the tribal council, the school superintendent, if you're doing research in a community, you want data on environmental statistics, whatever it is, there are very likely going to be people you want letters of support from. And nobody likes to be asked at the last minute to write you a letter and agree to what you were doing. And yes, if you're fortunate, you may have friends who will do that for you. If you've been around a long time, it's like a friend of mine just said the other day, I can make a call, but I don't want to make too many calls. So, and the other thing is, so you want to send out these emails weeks before the RFP is due, and just get used to the heartburn if you will get many of them the last day. But yeah, and if you're lucky, the Myras in your world will also provide you some suggestions at this early stage to make your proposal better. Have you thought about the fact that you are collecting data only on women or only in the Southeast? And maybe there are other factors that would come into play if you collected data in other parts of the country. So those are the beginnings. Do your one-page abstract, have your budget. Once you have written out your objectives, once you have done that template, you've got a pretty good idea what you're going to do and who's going to do it and who you need to help. Because I said, if I went back to that template, that I was going to recruit subjects. Well, where am I going to recruit them from? So that's my objective 7, is I was going to do a study on the effectiveness of this interactive media. So I'm going to collect baseline and outcome data. I'm going to recruit the sample. Who am I recruiting it from? I better have letters from people. And in this case, if we're talking about extremely vulnerable populations, right? In that particular project, we're working with children, minors, people with mental illness, people who've been court ordered to treatment. I better have something in there from those clinics saying they will work with me. I better have something from the courts saying they will work with me. So you need your template put together. You need your one-page abstract. Often people want to see the budget. You'll know who you're working with better than me, obviously, but often they want to at least know. They don't necessarily need the whole budget, but they want to know how much is in there for them. Are you going to pay those people you're recruiting? Are you going to pay my school, my clinic? So that's picture, template, one page, send out, ask for those letters. And then in the weeks while you're waiting for those people to get back to you, you can start on writing a grant. All right, so I will pause again, and you have some more questions, Dave?
Yes, ma'am, I do. So when you are reviewing or advising on a proposal, what is the first sign that the applicant understands the real world problem versus simply repeating funder language?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So they understand the real world problem. Uh, I think one thing for me, and I guess it depends on, the three things I've done a lot of reviewing for are on substance abuse, on education, and on vocational rehabilitation. If you mention in your grant the reasons it might not work and what you have done to address those, we realize that recruitment in rural schools can be difficult. And this is why we have in advance obtained commitments from these 5 school districts. We realize that vocational rehabilitation for people with substance abuse disorders has the lowest rate of successful job placement. However, our project has 10 years of data showing that we place people at a higher rate because we do these things. We have individual meetings with them, whatever. So I think that's one thing that impresses me. You should have, my doctorate's in applied statistics, so you should have some statistics in there, not that alcoholism is a major problem in our community, but that in our community, we have 47 arrests for minor in possession per 1,000 residents compared to the national average of 32. I don't know what it is, but I just made those up. But the thing is, you should have those numbers and assume that somebody reviewing that knows what those numbers are. Because that's another thing too, where I've read something saying, 57% of 57% of minors have been arrested for possession or something. That's wrong. So I think explaining why some projects don't fail and how yours is going to be different, and having hard data in there with citations. And I always say this too, you should mention it at a national level, that this is the cost to the nation of methamphetamine abuse. This is the percent of people or the number of people who abuse methamphetamines. And then you should also have it at your local level. And that tells me that you know the scope of the problem and you know what's likely to impede you. And then the other thing is, and again, this goes back to your literature review, some discussion of things that have worked and why you think they will be applied there.
Thank
Do
you.
you have another question?
Oh, sure. What makes reviewers willing to defend a proposal during panel discussion, especially when the project is complex, non-traditional, or is serving an under-resourced community?
I think sometimes it's personal. My co-founder for my second company passed away a few years ago, but he was Dakota. He was born and raised on the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation, first person from there to earn a doctorate. His mom spoke Dakota. If there was a proposal that came through that talked about education and they talked about revitalizing the language, Eric would fight for it. So sometimes it's a personal thing. Often, I hate to say this, but it's true. If it cites their research or that of their students, if it's saying that the research I did was foundational, I think often people are biased in favor of their own research, their own lab, their own students. I think it's just something they believe in because, like I said, either because it's a personal issue or I'm old. So I remember when mixed methods research was kind of a thing and people were qualitative or quantitative. And then there was some folks that came out and said, I really think that a mixed method study is the better way to go. So I think it's just personal, whether it's your own personal research, something that you have a family personal connection to, or just you believe in that.
Great, thank you.
And sometimes there's the opposite too. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but there are many things in my life I probably shouldn't say. When I'm reviewing software projects, what? When I'm reviewing software projects and they say they're going to use virtual reality headsets or other things that are very expensive, especially if they're talking about serving all schools. Okay, I've been to schools. As one study, we happened to go to the school in the second most affluent community in America. And they could buy a virtual reality headset for every kid, but by and large, it's not happening. I will be the opposite side of that, where I will really fight against it. That is, I won't exactly say because I am, well, no, actually, I was asked at one point not to swear at NIH meetings. I would just, that's a dumb idea. And I would argue very much against it. Something that I just absolutely thought every bit of experience I have says that will not work. Schools will not buy a virtual reality headset for every kid.
Okay.
If you're submitting a VR proposal, I hope I'm not on your.
We won't send it. Well, you might be in the review. We would never know. So I have a couple more. If you have the time, you want to go till about 4 and then start your next one, or do you
Okay,
want to
sure.
just continue? All right. How can applicants make a proposal rigorous enough for technical reviewers while still clear enough for reviewers outside that specialty?
You know, Jane Mercer, I don't know if any of you in sociology that remember her, but she said that she felt like if she couldn't explain it well enough that her undergraduate students understood it, that she didn't know it well enough herself. And she also said, I found this to be very true, that often doctoral students will write things that are much more difficult to understand than full professors have a great deal of experience, because they're sort of parroting things and they don't. I've often said I can explain logistic regression, structural equation modeling to the dumbest people God ever put in this green earth. I mean, there's a lot of stuff maybe Python I'm just okay in, so maybe not. So I think if you really know it, you should be able to explain it to anybody. It should not require an in-depth level of technical expertise. You know, logistic regression, ordinal logistic regression. You are putting things in order. I got in trouble for this one too. My friend who was from Texas A&M said that all men could be put in one of 3 categories. Yes, maybe if I was drunk and there ain't enough alcohol in Texas. So that is an ordinal ranking. And if you are using logistic regression, you are putting people into one of those 3 categories, which are in an ordinal rank. So I think if you really know your thing, you should be able, and I can also talk about things like a pseudo R squared and things like that. So you would throw in a little bit of that too. If some of the applications will give you not all of them, but some of them will give you a sample application that's been funded that you can check out. One of the things, for example, people are going to expect to know what's the power of the test. Sometimes the non-technical reviewers won't even know what power is. So you could throw in some stuff like that, but maybe explain a little bit, you know, the power of the test, the ability to reject a false null hypothesis. So just put in like a little parenthetical explanation will help. And then there are things that, depending on your field, you maybe don't need to explain. If you're doing something for an RFP and it's specifically on educational statistics, you don't need to explain what factor analysis is, because they wouldn't be reading it if they didn't know what factor analysis is. But if it's something that that an average intelligent person in your field, but not in your specific specialty, wouldn't know, then, like I said, that little parenthetical explanation could go a long way. And I don't think that proposals that are written to impress rather than inform are necessarily more likely to get funded. And I read somewhere, I think, did this person get paid by the syllable?
That's good. All right, we'll do one more and then we can move on. So what makes an evaluation plan feel genuinely executable rather than just impressive on paper?
An evaluation plan?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is you need baseline data. There's an old saying that came out of some statistics journal that said that calling in the statistician after the experiment's done is like calling in a physician after the patient's dead. And the best they can do is maybe do a postmortem and tell you what your research died of. So there should be baseline data collection for everything. I'm sure I have something here on that maybe if we have time we can go through, but for every single measure that you have, every single objective, there should be measurement. It does not have to be statistical measurement, right? It could be qualitative, that we are going to have focus groups and we are going to interview the faculty, the researchers, the students, but for every single thing that you say you're going to do, there ought to be some way you're measuring you're going to do it. And there should be, if you're going to improve it, which presumably is the point of your grant, you're going to collect baseline data, you're going to collect post-test data, and you're going to have some discussion in there, at least a little bit, about the reliability and validity of the measures you're going to use.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I have a few more, but we can wait until we move on and we'll let you cover some more ground.
Okay. Well, I will start at the beginning now, which is fine, but I wanted to make sure I had time to cover that template because, like I said, a lot of times the needs assessment and the objectives aren't so bad, but the things that really lose you points, and when you have somebody mention it, I just saw a grant like this. They had 4 or 5 people in there that I couldn't tell you to save my life what they were supposed to do. I mean, they had very impressive credentials, but there was nothing telling me what they were doing on that grant. So that loses you points. And like I said, I have spent so many times late at night in university offices. Now we work at home more, but I was, and this guy was from Cambridge, right? So I figured it'd be smart, like Cambridge, England. And he says to me, well, we're not going to make it. You're just going to have to call the Department of Health and Human Services and tell them we need a couple extra days. And I said, that is not how this works. This goes in, close of business, Eastern time tomorrow, or they won't review it. And we're going to get this done tonight if I have to kill somebody to do it. So those last few days where you're having to cut things and take them out of the budget. Hi. So if you can prevent that, that will improve, reduce the number of gray hairs you have, reduce the probability of heart attacks among academics. All right, so can you see this one that says getting started?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right. So now we skipped over this because I said this is usually the part that people do fairly well, but let's start with who you will serve and what do you need to do it. So now we're starting at the top, right? The needs assessment. And you'll revise this several times, but figure out what you need and why you need it. Outline what you intend to do, estimate your budget, identify who will do it. So that's kind of that whole. And this goes back to some of the questions that you asked. Don't try to find a project that fits the RFP. I've reviewed lots of grants. I've also tried to find a project. Don't try to you want to, if you don't want to do this thing, come up, if you want it, whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's you want to reduce the rate of screwworm, which is a terrible thing right now going on. If you want to prevent screwworms from moving across the border up to up further north, don't try to find a project that fits that RFP. Have the project you want to do and find the RFP that fits it. Instead of looking for an idea that fits that grant, come up with your idea and find a grant that fits. That's probably going to be way more successful because it uses your expertise, it uses what you're really interested in. There's a lot of grant funding out there. So instead of taking the RFP and trying to come up with something that fits that, come up with the thing that you want to do and find the RFP. Don't try to fool the reviewers. We've all tried it. It didn't work for any of us either. You really want to do a research project, but this is for a demonstration grant. And you say, well, we're going to demonstrate that this new type of chemical we're using that we're testing on all these calves prevents screwworm. No. If you have a demonstration grant, don't try to argue that it's an R01 grant. It's not. I've just seen this so many times. Yes, you're collecting evaluation data, but if it's a service project, there are funds out there for service project. There are funds out there for demonstration projects. They are not R1 grants that are being funded by NIH. And similarly, if your grant is cutting edge research that you don't really know is going to work, it's not a demonstration grant. So just don't do that. It's wasting your time and annoying the reviewers. You want to get ready before you start. I have been doing this a very long time, and it takes me 160 to 180 hours to write a grant. If I don't have at least 4 or 5 weeks, I will just say no. Well, I say no now anyway, but some of the grants are going to depend on others. So you can't say, oh, it takes 160 hours. I can do this in 4 weeks, because maybe you need to get some needs assessment data, and you need that needs assessment data from your court system, and they haven't got it to you yet. So I would expect for a major grant, I'm talking about something in the order of between 500,000 to $1 million, plan for 160, 80 hours of work, and plan that that's not going to be done in 4 solid weeks. You're going to need some lead time. A lot of lead time. We'll get into that. Usually I start on a grant 4 weeks before the request for applicants is out. So if I say it's going to take me 4 weeks, I'm starting on it 8 weeks ahead. And maybe 12 weeks ahead. Say it comes out in April, you've got 8 weeks to get it in. I started 4 weeks before that came out. So if you start when the RFP comes out, I have a 4-week head start on you. And the reason is because I do what I just said. I am not a big hypocrite. I identify a project that I think this would be a great thing. We have kids whose family members are addicted to meth. Nobody's working with those kids. How you often learn to make decisions and make good choices is in your family. And if, like, honest to God, is happening, your dad's chasing somebody around in the front yard with an axe because he thinks they're the devil, that's probably not somebody to get decision making from. So here's the project I want to do. All these kids love phones. I think I can create this. All right, I have a project. I'm looking to see what would likely fund that. When would that likely come out? For a lot of the competitions, small business innovation research grants, tribal vocational rehabilitation, R01 grants, the area awards, there's a large number that don't change dramatically from year to year. So you can start with last year's request for proposal and create a rough draft. Now, you don't necessarily want to start, sometimes there will be a specific, like a special competition. Maybe they won't have that again next year. But if the content required by most grants is already done, like the boilerplate, then you're going to start with 10% or more of the requirements finished the day it's released. Common boilerplate, it's going to have a facilities section. Well, you know where you work, you know what equipment you have available, you know your facilities. If you're at USF, you write about, how great your libraries are, and you've got a program there for incubation of businesses. So whatever is related to your specific area, try and write up that way you can. You know about yourself. You have in the National Library of Medicine, there's a required format for that NSF and a lot of grants use for CVs. You can have that done. Anybody that you want working on the grant, you can have theirs done. And even if they need to update it a little bit when the grant proposal is coming out, 90% of that'll be done. So all the boilerplate stuff, facilities, equipment, personnel, maybe not necessarily what each person is going to do, but their capabilities, their CV, all of that should be done. have needs assessment data on hand for your specific service area. Whatever it is that you're addressing, if it's, oh gosh, I know kudzu, right? Is that how I say it? Or the scourge of the South. If you can tell I work with a lot of ag programs. Are you doing something on that? If you're doing something on unemployment. So, and things that are relevant to the programs I work with would be unemployment statistics, the percent of high school graduates, college graduates, percent incarceration rate, special ed placement, anything relevant to your program. If it's substance abuse, the percent of substance abuse disorders, minor in possession, DUIs, vehicular accidents that result in death. There's years productive life lost. Whatever that specific data is, you should have it and update it fairly, maybe once every year or so. And I had a client say to me, this is something you might have to fight with people a little bit about. She said, you make our community sound so needy. There are a lot of good things about living here. People have said that to me many a time, and they're right. And when we get to personnel and facilities and resources and maybe project design, we could talk about those things. But in the need for project section of your grant, you're going to say why this project is necessary. And if everything is going great around here, there's really no point in funding you either. You want the statistics for the state, region, or country, and I am totally not above using whichever one makes you look more needy. You want to be able to say that while the national unemployment rate or dropout rate or whatever is 10%, in your area it's 40%, thus showing a high need for the program to reduce unemployment. In North Dakota, their educational achievement overall tends to be above the national average. So if I was writing for a school or district in North Dakota, I would compare them to the state. If I was in another state where theirs was below the national average, I might compare that district to the country. But you need to have statistics both for your specific area where you're doing the research and for the state or region or country. I have to say, and I think this is even more true in the current administration, generally reviewers are a lot more interested in how you compare to the country than globally, because you're not being funded by the world, you're being funded by the federal government or the state government. And what, as a reviewer, I want to see is needs assessment data that is specific and current. When David asked earlier, and this is another way that shows things were written by ChatGPT or whatever, how do I know that a proposal is good as opposed to just compliant? If they say we have high unemployment, as opposed to Coachella has the highest unemployment rate in the country at 11.5%, nearly triple the 4.2% for San Bernardino and Riverside, and give a citation for that, that makes me think your area. You know your area where you're going to be doing this project, and the area of unemployment, vocational rehabilitation, whatever. They want to see a source for your data. And again, this is a sort of thing you can do now. You can do it 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 months before the RFP comes out. Nobody's going to fault you that the data are from 2025 and it's 2026. They shouldn't be from 2022, but whatever. There should be a source for your data. And the federal government, and again, sadly, it's not as accessible as was, but there is a lot of data from, there's a lot of health data that the federal government collects, a lot of census data. You can also, and that census data can be drilled down, right, by city, county, state. And then what the reviewers want to see is that this is a problem and that your specific community has a greater problem than the country as a whole. Again, a proposal that I scored really low, they wanted funding for early childhood education, and it was from a very affluent community. And the needs assessment data basically showed their kids were doing better than average, which didn't surprise me. So why should they get the funding over someplace where kids are doing really poorly? And they didn't get the funding. And as I said, get started now. Before you even identify a grant, if this is an area, if you're talking about treating pancreatic cancer, you should have some data on what the number of people who have pancreatic cancer every year are, who are diagnosed, what the mortality rate is. So all of that data you should have now, and you should update it every year or two. Then when you get to needs, what is it that you want to address? Be as specific as possible, not just substance abuse, but lack of inpatient treatment facilities for individuals addicted to methamphetamine, or children of alcoholics becoming alcoholics themselves. And again, this goes back to, how do I know this is not ChatGPT? How do I know this is compliant? This is more than compliant? Because the grant says, the RFP says, this is for addressing the issue of substance abuse in the United States, but you have a very specific part of it. It goes back to that idea of having objectives that are specific and achievable, and eliminating substance abuse is neither specific nor achievable. Increasing the number of inpatient treatment facilities by 3 from the current 2 is going to be a substantial increase, and have that many more people who can get services. Intervening before children of alcoholics become alcoholics themselves. So the more specific it is, focus on, if you're talking about substance abuse, is it prevention? Like in the second example, is it treatment? And if that RFP is for prevention and yours is treatment, go find another RFP, and vice versa. So here's a grant I wrote quite a while ago, but it did get funded too. So we're talking about specifically rural communities. Methamphetamine is significant problems in rural communities. And it's important because it is implicated in severe health problems, like hepatitis B, C due to intravenous drug abuse. Methamphetamine use among American Indian Alaskan Natives is double that of white. So they were applying for this for a reservation. Over the past decade, drug arrests increased 1,500%. So this is good. This has all the things I'm looking for, except that it's very out of date. 2015 was 11 years ago. So in this case, I would recommend that you go back to the sources where you got your community data, get those updated, go and find some more recent sources. You could mention that in this period, from 2005 to 2015, it increased 1,500%. And then you want to say, and it hasn't declined since, or it's increased 5% since then, or whatever. Other thing you need to have on staff: resumes in the required format for all your staff. So if you need to add somebody in last minute, you can do it. Your organization's UEI, which is unique entity ID, a DUNS number used to be acceptable, but it hasn't been for a while. And you can get a UEI when you register in SAM. If you are at some place like USF, your organization has a UEI. You need a copy of your organization's indirect cost agreement, if you have one. If you're a major university, you have one, because in mini grants, you're going to use whatever that negotiated rate is. You will probably need to enter your EIN number or tax ID number. Again, if you're at a major organization, you have this. If you are at a small nonprofit, maybe you're not registered in SAM. You want to get that done right away, because you can't apply for a lot of things unless you're in SAM. Getting registered in SAM or updated can take from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on, like, if your tax ID number doesn't match for some reason. Oh, this is one. If the person in your organization designated as the entity administrators left and you don't have the login, highly recommend to you, do not, if you're at a smaller organization, do not have an individual person's email for your SAM registration, unless that person's like me and they own the company. Because what I've seen happen is somebody left a nonprofit in not very happy circumstances, and they were the person designated as the entity administrator, and they had a very, very, very difficult time getting in to update their registration. So any other systems that your funding targets are going to use, like ERA Commons for NIH, you want to be registered in those and keep those registrations updated. Because once you get started on that grant, you already have other jobs, right? So I'm just looking what time I had. You already have other jobs. So don't make yourself more crazy than you need to. If you can keep things like your SAM, and if you're at a big university, somebody else is responsible for maintaining your SAM registration, right? But you personally need to be in ERA Commons to submit a grant. So research.gov, whatever it is that the agency you're targeting requires, make sure you're already in that system. And for the love of God, don't leave it till when the grant is due and realize that you need to get in that system and it might take you 2 or 3 days. That's just crazy. Another thing you can do, so this is all before, so we went through what you do when the grant comes out, but all before your grant is, you've even identified an RFP. You should have an updated literature review with bibliographic citations. Again, you can use AI for this. This is why I have research assistants. I tell them we have a couple of different licenses, right, for AI that are paid. And you can do a deep search on Gemini and give it the specific thing that we are looking at, a grant and research administration that is going to provide education, like the BUILD grant. We're concerned about the graying of the field of research administration. We are concerned that many people come in the field sort of ad hoc. We want to develop a training program for junior level people in the field and undergraduate students that introduces them to research administration. Provide me with a comprehensive literature review that identifies the need in the field, existing programs, and include links. So I will put something like that in, and then, or actually one of my research assistants will, and then I tell them, go to every one of those links, make sure it exists, make sure, I don't ever actually use the Lit Review Critics personally, make sure it exists, make sure that it actually talks about whatever it is, like research administration burnout, research administration education. And then, because I'm spoiled and I'm the senior person, then download all of those as PDFs, put them in a Google Drive, and then I will read them all. So that way I'm not wasting my time reading things that are irrelevant. I'm definitely not putting any citation in that doesn't exist. And I'm definitely not putting any citation in. I didn't read the whole thing. I know that there are people that just read the abstract, but I don't. And in your Lit Review, again, this goes back to how do I know this is a proposal that's beyond compliant, it's good. There should be both need and proposed methods, because as you read through that, you think, well, I hadn't thought of this motivational interviewing technique, but it seems to have worked these other places. And that's something you can do before the RFP is released. And if you're really interested in this field, you're probably updating that regularly. And then after the statistics and research on the problem, follow up with research backing your solution to that problem. And that's another crazy thing I'll see, where somebody writes a needs assessment and it talks about how alcoholism or pancreatic cancer or kids not getting vaccinated, whatever, is a problem in the country. And I agree with everything they say. But then why are we going to fund this particular clinic in Kentucky? So after that, include the need for your program. Include statistics and research on the problem and follow up with research. What is your solution to that problem? And that's where that whole, that all those activities came in, right? That align with those objectives. Include literature on your method. And again, this is fine, But if I saw this, I would say you need to update it. Like, come on, this one's from 1995. Now, you're registered and everything. You're, like I said, your institution, if you're a PI, if you're applying for an R01 grant, you're not the person who does the SAM registration, right? But you do need your lit review. You do need your own personal registration so that you can create a grant and submit a grant in ERA Commons or research.gov or whatever it is. You probably should also consult your sponsored programs office, because another thing that people don't realize if they've never written a grant before, you think that the deadline is June 12th. So you think you have till June 12th to submit that grant. But very often in the bigger institution you are, let me ask you a question, Sandy, do you at USF, do you require people to submit the grant to you or somebody specific? I mean, I as a PI can't just click submit, right?
PIs are not allowed to submit proposals. In fact, only sponsored programs has that authorization as the authorized official representative for the institution, because NSF does not fund Dr. DeMars. NSF funds
They
the
should.
University of South Florida. And grants must be submitted to sponsored programs 5 days in advance of the sponsor's deadline.
So know that number, because I have never turned in a grant early. Know that number, and it will drive you crazy if you think, well, I have, it's not due for another 4 days, and sponsored program says, sorry, or you need somebody to approve it, and that person's not there. So know that number. And it may be different depending on your institution, right? Like you know, I've worked at smaller colleges where it could be a day or 2 days in advance. I have never worked anywhere somewhere where you could just trot it over to the president's office and they would sign it for you. Now, maybe those places exist, but I've never been to one. So can you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
First thing, read the RFP. Create a draft that matches the RFP exactly in the order specified using the exact font size and margins specified. If it says 1 inch margins all the way around, the very first thing you do is you open up a Word doc and you make the margins 1 inch all the way around. So if there's separate documents, multiple documents, separate ones for equipment, whatever, worry about that later. But first of all, create a document that if they say you need these specific things, put those specific things in that order. Problem, this, whatever they say you need to have, put it in your document in that order. So you're sure that you have everything. You can split them out to separate documents later. And here's here's another cool thing that you can use for AI. Once you have written your proposal, do this only if you are not using a free version, because the free versions can use your documents for training. If you have a paid version of an AI that says your data is not used for training, you can upload your proposal and you can upload the RFP and say, give me anywhere this document doesn't match the RFP. Or another place you can use AI is you can upload the RFP and say, give me all of the requirements for page limit, font size, so on for this RFP. And then I would still go and check it, because I would say, give me all the requirements and the page number. Because I don't take, you know, if $3 million is riding us, I'm not going to take anything that Gemini says for granted. So it gives me the pay, and then I'll go back and look.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
Okay, so at the University of South Florida, like many large universities, we have an institutional AI, which means that when you upload something into the institutional AI, it is within USF. However, do you want to share your draft proposal with the people in the college next door or the department down the road? USF is 6,000 faculty strong, almost $760 million in awards. We have a lot of faculty doing research every single day. But every single one of you, your ideas are your ideas. And once you share them, they are shared. So if you want to disclose your idea, work with Tech Transfer and disclose your idea before you put it in a proposal that will be read by a peer review panel or into an AI institutionally or on the World Wide Web. Thank you.
All right, so can you just see this where it says outline?
Yes, ma'am.
Cool. Okay. So now I have my outline. This is exactly matches what the RFP said. I'm going to give it some specific objectives. These are just because this was required by statute. All services will be provided according to an individualized plan of employment jointly developed by VR counselor and the client. And my goal in this case is to provide 100 services to 100 tribal members each year. And under this, they'll coordinate a broad range of services. They'll ensure access to all eligible participants. And, we talk about evaluation. I think I do have something on evaluation. Yeah, I think we'll have time for it. But if you provided 100 services, that's easy enough to count, right? You go in your database, hopefully you maintain a database of every client, and you see if there are 100 of them. If there's a broad range of services, that can be some qualitative evaluation where you go in and somebody on the evaluator staff goes through those files and checks off this many people, or you can do it if you do like we do and have a database. This is the number of people got this service. This is the number of people got that service. Anything you have here under an objective, you ought to be able to evaluate. I recommend having 1 to 6 goals. If you have too many, your project doesn't seem very focused. And the objectives you have under those ought to be measurable and tied to goals. So you go back to this example here, the goal was to provide services to 100 tribal members each year. The objective, coordinate a broad range of services, ensure access to all eligible participants, that they'll be provided on site in the reservation's largest town, and at least weekly in the other districts. All of those things can be measured. And so when we talk about specific, I say this all the time, reviewers, I'm not the only one, love SMART goals, and they hate that hand waving. We're going to help our people through strengthening our cultural traditions for the children. Yeah, that sounds nice, but what exactly are you going to do? How will you know if you've achieved it? Is it realistic? Is it relevant? Why do you think this is going to address the need? I, honest to God, was at a program where they paid for all the kids to get senior pictures, graduation pictures. I'm not sure what that was going to accomplish. And when are we going to get it done? You might ask, what's the difference between a goal and objective? It is whatever the RFP says it is. I have seen RFPs where they define things as goals that I would think is an objective. I personally think a goal is more general. It's what you're going to accomplish. However, if the RFP calls something an objective that I would consider a goal, since I'm asking for their money, that's what I consider an objective is today. And so you have assignments. So we're going to recap all of your assignments. One is to write at least one goal and two objectives. It's an assignment. Then we go back to your previous goal, your previous assignment, which is to do a couple of paragraphs. What is the thing you're doing? And the previous assignment to that, which was drawing pictures. So now you have 3 assignments. So I could take some more questions, or I could talk a little about evaluation.
I have 3 questions that came into the chat while you were on this last portion, Dr. Mars. So
Okay.
Keisha wants to know, is it better to look for funding that will cover your entire project, or should you look for multiple smaller grants that will cover specific components?
If I can do it, I want a grant that covers the entire project because there's no guarantee that I will get those other specific components. If it is something that can be broken up, like the Small Business Innovation Research Awards, they have a phase 1 and a phase 2, and the phase 1 could be a pilot. So if it is feasible that the one component standalone by itself is worth doing, you could do that. But the better thing, I think, is find something that will fund the whole proposal.
Sounds good. And then we have another question. We were talking about statistics, and you were talking about looking at the United States, given the current situation. But what if the US compared to global statistics, what if there's a large disparity? I mean, should we bring that up?
Yes,
Anyway?
if the US looks way worse, you
Yep.
should bring that up.
Okay, good, good. And then this goes back to AI tools. Can we use AI tools to design the research framework, the flow chart, and the diagram?
I don't know what you mean by the research framework. If you mean, can you use this to create graphics? I think that's great.
Okay.
Because that's just kind of clerical type of thing. If you're talking about like coming up with the actual research design, I would never do that.
So to clarify, you would not put your draft proposal into AI and ask them to illustrate with a graphic what the research design should be?
I don't think I
No?
would do it that generally. I might say, here is my research design that I'm trying to think of one that children who receive, we're going to have an intervention and control group. Children who are in the intervention group will get 3 hours of interactive software usage for 10 weeks. Children in the control group will not. We will do a pre and post test, and then the following year we will do a crossover. Illustrate this. Yes, I would do something like that. If I have a written out design, I just want that turned into a graphic, I would definitely do that. What I would not do is say, give me a research design to assess the impact of this software.
Fair enough. We have about 20 minutes left. How much time are you going to need? Because I have more questions. This is the reason I asked.
Well, let's go.
And
with
I
the
can send them
questions.
to you.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Well,
think that answering the questions gives them the time they need to do writing their goals and objectives and doing this homework assignment, unless of course they can upload these homework assignments somewhere on Canvas. Dave, is there a place to do that?
There is a place to do that. There are several discussions out there. There's a community discussion, and they can certainly upload things there. So yeah, and they can turn everything in there, and we'll take a look at it. We're not grading these, but by all means, you should do this. So
and you can draw your picture out and just take a picture of it with your phone. And I'll show you something else I have that you all will laugh at.
Such fun.
She's leaving the room.
Yes. Well, and the benefit of doing the homework assignments, like writing the goals and objectives and things and putting them in Canvas, is then you crowdsource and get other people engaged in the resources you want to do. And we can say, oh, and this sponsor funds that. Go ahead.
Sometimes you need giant Post-it notes. So sometimes I need a bigger picture. Or I get lots of those little sticky notes and move it all around. And then take a
Makes
picture
sense.
of it.
Makes sense. So when an applicant is smaller, newer, or community-based, what evidence helps reviewers trust their capacity without expecting the same infrastructure as a large university or institution?
Lean into your strength. If you are a community-based organization, it's very likely you know that community way better than somebody in the chemistry department at USF. Sorry, chemists. But I mean, if you're talking about improving high school chemistry and you're a chemistry teacher in a high school, if you are talking about reducing depression among LGBT youth and you work in a clinic with those youth, lean into, we know this problem because we have contacts with the community, because we're able to recruit people, we have their trust. And it will be interesting, again, things may have changed in the current environment, but one of the things that people like in NIH realize is there are certain populations it's difficult to do research with because they're skeptical of healthcare workers. They maybe don't really have their act together enough to get to their appointments or for whatever reason. If you're working with one of those groups and you could say, I have connections, I work with teenage mothers and I've been doing it for years and our program's been successful doing this, that's you don't want to pretend that you're a researcher at USF. You want to say, this is who we are and this is why this is our strengths. And I would be looking in that case, probably not for research grants, but for demonstration grants, for pilot grants.
Great, thank you. So now, when a proposal is rejected, how do you know whether to revise and resubmit, redesign the project, or just stop pursuing the funding?
That's a really good question. One of the things that drives me crazy, my business partner for many years, great guy, but we had submitted a grant many, many years ago and we didn't get funded. And I said, where's the reviews? And he said, I just threw them away. We didn't get it funded. I was like, what? So no, I read the reviews. If they really hate the idea, read the reviews and try to figure out, first of all, was it a bad idea or was it a bad idea for them? You know, did you submit it to some place that funds more cutting edge research and yours is a demonstration project? In our company, we're a lot more often creating educational software and applying it to new areas like research administration or creating a game that is working with kids that have or adults that have mental health disorders or something like that. We're not coming up with the newest large language model. So was it you just submitted to the wrong place? Or are there specific things in there you could fix? Sometimes it's very obvious these people wrote the grant at the last minute. And if you had more time, could you go back in? If they say your needs assessment is very sparse, you didn't cite any current research, that's an easy one to fix. If they say, we don't think your staff has the capability of doing this kind of project, then can you bring in someone else? And I'm trying, I mean, generally reviewers try to be fairly nice. I mean, you're told to do that and try to be helpful. So even projects that are god awful, I don't think anybody's ever written, you know, don't do this, find a different career. If you have a super low score, that might be it. I think the big determinant is, number one, honestly, how much effort did you put into this? If you got a really low score and you did it in the 2 weeks before it's due, no one's surprised. How much do you really believe in this? There's the chair of our board likes to cite, I think it's the woman who, I forget what, she won the Nobel Prize for medicine. And she mentioned that at 5 a.m. she gets a call finding out she wins the Nobel Prize. And at 6 a.m. she logs in and finds out that her NIH grant was rejected. And her comment was, even if you win the Nobel Prize in something, there will be people saying you don't have enough expertise to conduct this research. So if you really spend a ton of time on it, I would look at, well, regardless, I would always look at what the reviewers say. I have gotten things that the lowest score I ever got on anything, I submitted to a different agency and got it funded.
Okay, I'm going to go to this one. It's a little bit out of order, but after decades of writing, reviewing, and consulting on proposals, talking to you personally, what do you wish applicants understood about the gap between a strong idea and a fundable proposal?
Everybody has a need. I see this all the time. People are what I call blinded by need. You are in a community, and maybe it's a little bit different if you're doing like pure research grants, but things where people are looking at treating mental illness, treating substance abuse. People write so much about why this is needed that they're so convinced, and they're right, that they forget about writing why their idea is going to solve this problem. That the disconnect, and I think this is true across the board, the disconnect between need, activities, and personnel. I agree it's needed. Why is this a solution, and why are you the person to do it? That, if I could get people to connect those parts, that would make my life easier.
Great, thank you. And now, what is one mistake that even smart, experienced applicants continue to make because they are too close to their own project?
This is when I see a lot. They submit something that says this is needed at our specific campus, at our, or this, we need to do research on pancreatic cancer. Everybody agrees on that. The 5-year mortality rate, I teach epidemiology, the 5-year mortality rate is just abysmal, right? By the time it's detected, because it progresses rapidly, it's usually stage 3 or stage 4. That's a problem. And people are so blinded by that problem that they don't look enough outside of who else is working on it, what else has been done. So I guess that's kind of the same answer, but really smart people do that. You have been working on it for a long time, but so have a lot of other people.
Okay, I have 2 more. With AI-assisted writing becoming more common, what makes a proposal sound polished but intellectually empty? And what shows that the applicant still owns the thinking?
Oh my God, I've written some of the worst proposals written with AI. The thing that screams AI to me is it's very generic. Because how large language models work is they are based on probability. So the most probable thing is what occurs a lot in the literature. So they're very generic. And I've just read way too many of those. In fact, I believe, Sandy might know this better. I believe some of the agencies are now restricting the number of proposals that you can submit because people just are throwing spaghetti at the wall with these proposals. The thing that makes it look polished, well, I think often you're not supposed to know, but often you can tell when people are citing their own research, right? And if you can talk about specific findings, specific research that's been done, and how it connects to the problem at hand. And if it really does, because AI is great at sounding plausible.
And not all AIs are the same. So if you use Gemini or Copilot, it might look different when you use Claude. The results might look differently. But when you read it, the content is generalized, almost like reading a newspaper. Whereas when you write a really competitive and compelling grant, it reads more conversational. You're talking to your peer reviewer. You're addressing this problem. The human element is lost when you, and it may not be lost forever. AI is getting better every single day. But peer reviewers aren't just peer reviewers on grants, they're also peer reviewers for your publications and many of these outlets. They read a lot and they can recognize, and they oftentimes consider it a cheat, a shortcut, like you're not really vested in your own proposal. So be careful.
Thank you both. And now I have one last question, unless somebody raises their hand. So what kinds of reviewer criticism should applicants take seriously, even when they, the applicant, strongly disagrees with the comment?
Anything where they have some citation backing up what they said. For example, I have read proposals that said there has been no research done on this project, on this problem. And I would say the applicant says that there has been no research done on this project. However, Croxford 2025 had published research showing that early detection of, early screening for pancreatic cancer in nursing homes doesn't work or something. And so if they say some specific things, I would go and look at them. Now, it may be that that particular article was not the same as the research you were proposing, but perhaps you didn't make it clear why your particular screening program was different than that. So even if you disagree with it, if they cite something, I'd go look at the thing they cited and see if it backs up what they said. And if it doesn't agree with your understanding, take a look at your proposal. I mean, I don't get my feelings hurt on these things. If a reviewer doesn't like what I say, I will look at what they said. And like I said, sometimes I think this is a great idea anyway. Maybe your agency doesn't fund it, but somebody will, and they will. Or sometimes I think, well, I didn't really want to do it that bad. Well, really, if you are spending, 160, 180 hours of your life on this, and you've spent time leading up to that, and you're going to do it again, do you care about it that much? I have a lot of ideas. Maybe some other idea will be better.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I have no further questions to read to you, nor anything in chat. I would like to thank you personally. I have enjoyed this. I was looking forward to it. You did not disappoint. And so I'll turn it back over to Sandy.
The top 3 reasons that grants are not funded. Of all peer reviews, these are the things that are found most often. Clarity. The peer reviewer didn't understand what you were saying. It may be that you were saying everything, just not in a way they understood it, or that it was in your head, but not on the paper. Refrigerator blindness for your proposal. And clarity can be resolved with internal peer review, get someone else to read your proposal before red team review, or by trying to pitch your project to your chair. If you give your proposal to your chair or to a colleague and they don't get it, then your peer reviewers will certainly not get it. Alignment. Alignment is the second most common reason why grants aren't funded. Does it really align with what the foundation's goals are and the sponsor's intent with that funding opportunity? It could be that this is a really great grant and we have programs at this sponsor that does that. This is not the one. Maybe you should apply to that one. So this is why talking to your program officers is a really good idea. I have this fantastic idea. Let me give you this one pager. And if we could sit down for 15 minutes, just to make sure that I'm applying to the right place at the right time. And the third most common reason why grants are not funded, achievability. I don't think you could actually do it. Why your university, why in this region? Is there demand in that region? Do you have the people around you that you need? Do you have the facilities and equipment that you need? Can you actually do this? Have you ever done something like this before? And this is why pilot grants, an RO3 grant from NIH, or a planning grant from NSF, or a seed project funded by your institution. These are all great ways to show that what you're proposing is achievable. Do a small version first. So I hope that helps. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne-Maria. You're amazing.
We do have one hand. Ali, go ahead with your question.
Hi, yeah, sorry, this is toward the end. Yeah, just quickly, so how about like background, like experience and like experience in your own field, like publications and like how many talks you give, for example, as opposed to the actual content, like, you know, what you're trying to do in your proposal. But like suppose, you know, like the idea is great, but you lack the qualification, like, you know, the experience, like years and years of experience. How much is
Usually
that
that's
weight?
about 10%. It depends on the
Oh.
proposal, but usually that's about 10 out of 100 points.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the particular proposal will tell you that. Some proposals it's more, some proposals it's less. 10% is about average. And so I would definitely look at, if it's a research grant, you say you're going to publish, have you published anything before? Have you conducted any research studies before? If it's there's grants for new faculty, I wouldn't expect you to have published a lot, but if you hadn't published anything, I might question it. So I do think that matters.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, because I was just, you know, there's a reviewer, like a potential reviewer that I just asked if she can like just look over like my idea, and she was really adamant about like my lack of like experience. So, and then, but then I talked to other reviewers, like, I mean, potential reviewers, right, in the future. And they were like, I'm happy to review your idea. But this one particular, she was, and then I was like, all right, maybe, you know, I was kind of doubting, like, even if I should go for it or not.
Well,
Thank
I would
you.
look at
Yeah.
the RFP if in there, because it'll give you the points for each area, right? And so if in there
Okay.
personnel
always.
is, oh, that's
Well,
true.
Yeah, it
NSF
depends
is
on the
like,
sponsor.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's,
But-
it's the NSF one that I was looking at.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
happy to help you. Why don't you send us the link to the RFP, and we'll give you some guidance on what type of experience they're looking for. Sometimes you want to look for those early career opportunities, because then you're only competing against other early career
Right.
people. Whereas if you're applying for something that is like a parent RO1 or a NSF biology grant, for example, then you're competing against the people that are early, the people that are mid-career, and people that are well in advanced years of their career, right? So you're competing against the future Nobel laureates of your field at all stages of their career. So you want to think about that. And when you are applying for something where there are some really seasoned people that you're competing with, that's when you want to look around you and go, who can I add to this grant that is seasoned, that might be a fun PI to work with? Because that's also an opportunity for you to sharpen your skills and get mentored by someone a little further along.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're here to help you be successful. And NSF does have an early career grant, as does NIH and all the major federal funders. But there are also some really great early career grants funded by philanthropic foundations that we can help point you in the right direction.
And you don't mind if I send you like the link to the,
Email Dave.
okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to say thank you. I'm at work, but I appreciate it, and I didn't really realize about estimating the hourly rate in. I learned that when you have that on your Excel spreadsheet. So that was a good thought. I never thought about that. I just said, hey, that's the salary, but not the hourly. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
I'm going to jump off this call now because Anne-Marie has given me homework as well. So
Yes, that's
have a
right.
wonderful weekend.
All right, you guys have a great weekend.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.